All right, everybody, welcome into the Auburn Live Basketball Show. Appreciate everybody for joining us. I am Justin Hokanson. As always, Alan Head is with me. Alan, what's up? What are we doing?
What's up, Hoke? How you doing, buddy?
I'm good, man. How's your week been so far?
Week's been good. I obviously got to enjoy watching Auburn basketball. Let's say Janai Broom looking like Janai Broom the last couple of games. But
Yeah, he was good.
other than basketball, things have been great, man.
All right, we're going to talk about Georgia, Arkansas wins, and we're going to look ahead to Kentucky A&M games coming up. Before they do that real quick, shout out to Session Cocktail, sponsor of the show and friend of AuburnLive.com. Go check them out downtown Auburn, right there on Magnolia Avenue. Session Cocktail. If you're in town, I guess only one more home game. So when you're in town for Alabama, I think that's a 1:30. So if you get in town early, I don't know if they're open. For sure, after would be a great spot. Or if you come down Friday night, go to dinner, have a drink, and then sleep in, go get you some brunch, and then go to a 1:30 basketball game, last regular season game of the year, Alabama. But go check them out. Great old fashioned happy hours 4 to 7. Open Sundays too. So awesome place to go have a drink, relax, tell them that you heard about them through us. That would be greatly appreciated. Session Cocktail, downtown Auburn, Alabama. Okay, Georgia, Arkansas. Auburn is a 7-point winner over. Well, no, wait a minute. We talked about Georgia.
We talked about Ole Miss. We talked about Arkansas. We haven't talked about Georgia and Ole Miss.
Man, these games. It's this 3-game homestand. I'm like, I don't know what day we're on. You know, the home when it was kind of home in a way, you're like, you sort of was bracketed. Now it's just these 3 straight home games. I'm like, I don't know which was which. Yeah. We talked about Arkansas last show. So we need to talk about Georgia and Ole Miss, and when you look ahead to Kentucky and A&M. 12-point win over Georgia in a game that Auburn led at not nearly every second. Georgia did not lead 1 second, but Auburn never could stretch that out to blowout fashion. Georgia hung around, but it was a game where you never thought Auburn was really in danger, and they end up winning that by 12. And then they come back against Ole Miss, who had just dropped out of the top 25. I think the week before, Ole Miss lost to Vanderbilt and Mississippi State. So kind of a tough week for them going into Auburn, but still like net top 25, KenPom top 25 team. And Auburn ends up blowing the doors off of them. Ole Miss made it competitive the last 8-7 minutes of the first half. Auburn certainly helped that cause with some dumb turnovers. But then when Auburn stopped that, they pushed the lead back out in the second half, and it just kept growing and growing and growing. And Auburn ends up winning by 30 thanks to some late buckets that just made that thing really, really ugly. So Auburn's sitting at 26-2, 14-1 in the SEC. Of course, best 15-game start in the history of the program. The 98-99 team started 13-2. That team was 13-1, went to Arkansas. I remember watching that game, by the way. That 98-99 team was 13-1, went to Arkansas late February, and that Arkansas was still super dangerous then. Yeah. Pat Bradley went off in that game, and they scored like 100 on Auburn, and Auburn lost. So 14-1, best 15-game start. 15 games is the most Auburn's ever won in an SEC season. The Jabari Walker team in 21-22. So they're one game, win one of the next 3. They tie that. They could beat that. 27 regular season wins is the most in program history. They're sitting at 26. So 2 more wins. And I think it's, you could already make the case now, but we're, 2 more wins, and we're kind of unequivocally, it's the best team in the history of Auburn basketball from a regular season standpoint. They'll have the most regular season wins. They'll have the most SEC wins in a regular season. They've already got the most significant wins, like the most big time wins. The quadrants haven't always been around, but they've already blown that. No team has won as many ranked games, big games as this team has. You could potentially get the National Player of the Year, potentially got the National Coach of the Year. So we're only a game or 2 away from it, being able to kind of unequivocally say it's the best team in the regular season that Auburn's ever fielded. That's where we're at. But what did you make of you can speak on that, but also Georgia, Ole Miss. Would anything stand out about those games and just kind of where we're at in general?
Sure. We'll just kind of do a quick overview. Georgia, really good back and forth game. I thought Georgia, and showed you later in the week, right, when they beat Florida,
Yep.
that they are still a very dangerous program. And so I know that there were some Auburn fans that were a little upset that Auburn didn't blow Georgia out, but give credit to that team. I thought that they were getting ready to kind of pack it in some when they played Auburn, and they did not. And they have continued to play extremely hard. So that's a good ball club. It really is. Asa Newell, very unique matchup. A kid that's obviously going to play in the NBA sooner rather than later. Janai got the better of him that night. And if you're going to take anything away, it's probably the second half where Auburn really started to assert itself. It kind of shot the ball a little poorly in the first half of that game. Second half, they got things going. Janai started to look like Janai Broome again. They obviously go on to win that by 12. I think Denver hit like 8 free throws in a row or something of that nature there towards the very end.
Yeah. They were 10 of 10 in the last 90 seconds. Auburn.
Yes. So foul shooting was at a premium, and then you carry it forward against a really good Ole Miss team. You're right. I mean, a top 25 KenPom team, a team that is top 30 in net, I think, still at this point, even after that 30-point blowout. So very quality program, a program that's going to be in the NCAA tournament. Well coached by Chris Beard. And to me, it felt like Auburn was really kind of a bad matchup for Ole Miss. They just could not match up on the interior at all. And Auburn shot it extremely well. Chad Baker-Mazara kind of got back into a groove of things. Miles shot it better. So I think really the only one that probably isn't seeing it the way Bruce would like right now is Tahad, but they'll get that right. I mean, freshmen all hit walls, and then, the good ones can kind of work themselves out of that. I think this is probably the longest stretch of games he's ever played at this level of competition, exerting this kind of effort and energy. So it's natural for freshmen to kind of go into this kind of a lull. My guess is he'll work his way out of it here relatively soon, but just a good week for Auburn. You beat 2 quality opponents, and now you're getting ready to move into possibly the toughest 3-game stretch of this schedule, where you have on the road at Kentucky, a place that Auburn has not won in since
January of 1988.
January of 98. That's the last time you won Rupp.
Consecutive losses.
Wow. Okay, 20 consecutive losses. So House of Horrors for Auburn there. Then you go on the road to a tough A&M, lost to Vanderbilt in their house last night, but still a very competitive program. Buzz is a very good coach. And then you've got Alabama at home. And even though Auburn handled that game in Tuscaloosa, I would ask Auburn fans, or encourage Auburn fans, not to make too much of any one game and realize that Alabama is still capable of beating you, even in Neville Arena.
Yeah.
So this is a very pivotal 3-game stretch for this team. How do they play going into this? Can they get 2 out of 3? Can they get 3 out of 3? Everything at stake. You heard Charles Barkley on the national broadcast. This is something you and I talked about, and he mentioned it in his memory, or to him, the Big East during that period of time in the 80s, where you had those competitive teams of St. John's and Syracuse and Georgetown. And he said that's the best brand of basketball he's seen in college until this year's SEC. And he thought this is the deepest conference he has ever seen. To be where Auburn is, 14-1 in this kind of a conference, to have the overall season record that they have, with the only 2 losses you have are to possibly 2 number 1 seeds.
Yeah.
It is just amazing. And while Janai Broome is without question either number 1 or number 2, or is going to finish to number 1 or number 2 in National Player of the Year, I would not consider him a guaranteed first-round prospect for the NBA draft. I think the cohesion and the the connection of this group, the consistency, it just makes them special. while you have a dominant college player and a bunch of really good players, you just don't get a dip from these guys. Night in and night out, they show up, and that's what makes this group so special. Is that in 1 through 9, they have a group that can come out there and they can be as good as a whole, not necessarily one individual player, but as a team, as a unit. They play an extremely high level. They understand what Bruce is asking of them. They understand the nuances of both the offense and defense that they're being asked to execute. And so it's just amazing to watch, Justin. It really is. In my wildest dreams, I would have never thought that Auburn would be at this point. I thought 14-4 was possible, 13-5 before the season started. And then when you got through non-con, I thought, okay, maybe they're better than that, maybe 15-3. And now we're looking at potentially 17-1 or 16-2 being on the table. And if they get to that, I don't understand how you could pick anybody else other than Bruce Pearl as National Coach of the Year. I mean, if he's able to have that kind of a finish, it would blow my mind if they pick somebody else.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I said when he was nominated, when he was one of the handful of coaches nominated, I said on X, I was they're the number one team in the country.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the discussion of one of the best regular seasons, in college basketball history. But if you want to say, well, if you go back so far, we didn't have Ken Palm, and how do you equate some of that? And okay, fine. In the Ken Palm era, they're knocking on the door. They're among the best regular seasons that we've ever seen. And so if they win the championship or even share it, doesn't really matter. If they hang a banner and they're sitting there one and they have a regular season, that's what I don't know. What do you do? If he's not coach of the year, then I would be fascinated to know who you give it to, because he's going to be he's going to have a championship.
Yes.
And he's going to have more quad one wins than anybody. And it's going to be within a few of the most regular season quad one wins by a team ever. And he's going to have a guy up for player of the year. Where would you go, John? You go to Shire and you go, okay, with Shire. Well, they didn't play anywhere close to the schedule. So what are we doing? So we're let's say Duke ends up with one more win and they win their championship. And to me, the only way Bruce maybe doesn't win it is if they falter and somehow don't win the championship.
Yeah.
Hard to do it if they falter down the stretch, which would basically mean they would lose, they'd lose 2 out of 3, including Bama. Bama wins out, right? No, that's a share.
Yeah. So they would need to lose all the next 3.
Lose them all. So if they lose all 3, and Alabama wins out and they lose the championship, you could go, it's hard to not, despite everything they did, it'd be hard if you didn't win your conference championship to be coach of the year. That'd be a tough one. But barring that, yeah, I think Bruce is up there for coach of the year. I don't really have anything to add on the Georgia games. I mean, the one point I wrote about after the Ole Miss game, I wrote in my brief thoughts and grays, I just said, it's just funny how after Arkansas and Georgia, certain, some Auburn fans, but people on the outside were like, oh, what's Auburn kind of okay, win, but sort of so. And then you're like, oh, and then Arkansas beats Missouri. Oh, okay. Arkansas actually is playing good basketball, and they are a different team. Wow, it turns out. And then you beat Georgia in a game where Georgia led 0 seconds, and then you turn around and Georgia just goes off on Florida. Florida just jumped on them early, and Florida, boy, that came all the way back. And then Georgia played a horrendous 3 minutes. Florida comes all the way back, and then Georgia just hits 1 3, and then they end up winning. I can't believe for Florida to come all the way back the way they did, and then literally the last 45, 50 seconds, Georgia to go on that just a couple of buckets run and win the game was brutal. But it doesn't matter. Georgia beats Florida, and you're like, oh, well, that Georgia. It's just a reminder of how good the SEC is, and I think that sometimes we forget that. We're like, no, the SEC is really good. No, it's really difficult. It's just it's we're not just saying it. Georgia's a good. Dude, has anybody watched St. John's this year?
Yeah,
St. John's is really good. You know who beat them? Georgia.
Georgia.
Like Georgia's beaten, Kentucky's pretty good. Georgia beat them. I mean, Georgia's got some legit wins. I mean, one okay, but you beat Florida and Kentucky and St. John's. Georgia's a good basketball team, and Auburn swept them. And Arkansas is a much different team. Now, you know who beat Michigan? Arkansas on a neutral floor when Arkansas was not even. I mean, they started out the SEC season terrible, but they beat Michigan neutral. So it's like those are good wins. And then, of course, UC Auburn comes back and whips Ole Miss. That the way they beat Ole Miss, it sort of reminded me of South Carolina last year, where South Carolina was really good, but that just was a matchup problem.
Yep.
Like South Carolina had a great year, but Auburn just demolished them in two meetings, once in Auburn and then again in Nashville. And Bruce was like, sometimes it's about matchups. He said that exact same thing after South Carolina. Sometimes it's about matchups. And that's what he said after this one. He's like, we just have the height, and they don't. And it's hard to deal with that. Janai looks as healthy as he's been in a long time. I don't really see a whole lot of pay. If he's got any tape on that left ankle, there's nothing bulging out. He came running out before Ole Miss, bouncing around. He's, I think, fine. I think he's at this point. I think he's fine. The Alabama game, he had that tweak where he kind of turned weird. And that was a weird turn, but I think other than that, he looks good. And he did some things in that Ole Miss win. When he drove baseline a couple times that I think was a good sign for him when it comes to his ankle. Great to see Chad. That was as aggressive and engaged as I've seen Chad. I couldn't even tell you the game. I mean, I couldn't even name the game. He came out of the gates locked and loaded. I mean, he came out really, really fired up and played really well, hit a couple threes, hit his floater on the baseline. If he gets in the lane and hits that floater, he's tough. Still gets ahead of himself sometimes. Like when he's feeling it, he wants the ball and he kind of thinks he's running the show a few times. And then it takes a turnover or something, him making a mistake to sort of bring him back down to earth a little bit. Or when something doesn't go his way, whatever. But he just does so many other valuable things. Chaney was really good against Ole Miss. I put up a stat earlier. So Chaney is now double figures in 6 of the last 7. The one he didn't was Georgia. But he's 6 of the last 7. He's been in double figures. In those 7 games, in the last 7 games where Chaney's been in double figures 6 times off the bench, he is shooting 72% from 2 point. He is 34 of 47 from inside the arc in the last 7 games. I mean,
that's serious.
And he's not Janai Broom. He's not backing you down and laying it up. I mean, these are baby hooks or turn around jumpers or elbow jumpers or floaters from 4 or 5 feet out. I mean, they're not. They're shots that you want to make when you're that, but they're not. He's not backing you up and just going off the glass and laying it in. I mean, it requires some touch and some finesse and some footwork and So man, he's been phenomenal. And the only other thing I'll add on the Tahad thing, yes, he is shooting it just straight up. He's not making anything. In his last, I went and looked. So he scored 24 against Georgia, right? That breakout game at Georgia. Since then, he's played 10 SEC games. He's shooting 24% from 3 since that game. He's way better shooter than that. He's 2 of 10 in his last 3 games. So he's struggling. But I made sure to point out in that same 10 game stretch, 31 assists, 12 turnovers. You'll take that every day. And in that same last couple of games, 3 games where he's 2 of 10 for 3, he's 15 assists and 4 turnovers. So his whole game isn't, and I actually think he's been defending decent. I actually have seen signs of him defending as good as he has all year. At Alabama, a couple of moments, like he's still small and there's some tough matchups sometimes, but I've seen some signs of him staying in front, trying not to foul, that I've liked. Him in Denver the last few games have been have been, I think the last 3 games against those 3 really good defenses, Denver and him have 20 assists and like 4 or 5 turnovers. So, you'll take that from your guards if they're playing like that.
I could not agree with you more. And it's really been encouraging to watch point guard play last year. Really, to me, kind of it made the determination of whether Auburn was really going to be in a game or not. I mean,
Yeah.
Janai was pretty consistent all year long, and he was still your best player. But it's a guard-driven game sometimes, and specifically at the point guard position where you have to have somebody that can manage the game. And I feel as though you have 2 players at that position right now, regardless of whether there's shots going in or not. They are running this team, and they're managing the game in a way where they're not having a ton of turnovers that are just overly detrimental to what you're trying to accomplish on offense. And in the case of Denver, he's found himself offensively some and been a very consistent scorer there. Whereas with Tahad, the explosion is still there. He's probably still your best creator, especially off the bounce. But it's just not going down for him right now. That will come back around. I feel like that young man has enough confidence, and Bruce has enough confidence in him. They will figure out a way to get him going. And it would be beneficial if they could do it before the tournament. But if you got to wait till to see some magic happen in March, my guess is it'll happen at some point. It's going to happen for him. I feel that confident about that young man in his future. But,
Yeah.
Again, hat tip to this team and what they've been able to accomplish. And you're right about Chad being focused. I mean, I felt like the whole team, minus that 4-minute stretch going into the half, was as focused as I've seen them all year long. And look, you're getting into March. You want to make sure that you're peaking at the right time. Let's see if this is not the start to them peaking and playing their absolute best basketball again.
Yeah. Yeah, it was they were locked in. Again, I think they're the projected 1 seed. Again, them and Duke are close in that net. I saw when Duke won against Miami and crept to number 1 in the net. I don't understand really how that is happening, but then Auburn wins and jumps back. But if they're that close, that's wild, considering the differential in quad 1 wins. I would like to see Auburn hold on to that number 1 in net. I'm assuming they will, because they're about to play 3 top. I don't even know what A&M is in the net right now after that loss. Let me look real quick. A&M, of course, A&M lost to Vanderbilt and Mississippi
Back-to-back.
State got them in Starkville, right?
Yeah.
So like all of a sudden A&M's sputtering a little bit. There's still 20 in the net. Kentucky's 14. Bama's 6. So like Auburn, I even just playing those games, and if Auburn wins 1 or 2, I just Auburn could go 1 and 2, and I would think that they're going to stay 1. I'd like to see Auburn stay 1 in the net, have all the quad 1 wins, and make the number 1 overall seed thing. Not even a debate.
Sure.
Before we move on to Kentucky and A&M, real quick, Janai Broome, 24, 9, 4 assists, 2 blocks, and that's of course after that's Ole Miss, and that's of course after what did he do against Georgia? 31, 14, and 4. Was the only player, I think they said the only player this year to hit those numbers. He's the only player since Ben Simmons, like a decade ago or whenever Ben Simmons played, to have I think he's got 15 and 5 games this year, or 20, 15 and 5 games. I can't remember, but whatever it is. I mean, he's just doing things that that nobody else is doing. And I'm really fascinated to see how the player of the year thing turns out and what happens. But I don't know. I mean, just you got to finish strong, but boy, hopefully the strength of schedule thing will play into people's heads. It's just so subjective. I get it. Cooper Flagg's fun to watch and he's awesome, but oh man, I get there. Broome's, you know what? Chris Beard said it after the game, and I'm wondering if the voters are going to think the same way. Chris Beard said, when you watch film of Janai Broome, he goes, you're not like, he's like, Chris Beard literally goes, there's times where you're like, does he take a play off or he's just sneaky? He goes, but he plays with poise and he plays with a good pace.
Yep.
which I would agree. A good pace is, I think, a nice way of saying like Janai conserves his energy and uses his energy when he needs to use his energy. If you ever watch him, my favorite Janai Brim thing is to make a basket, and if he's a little bit winded, he will make sure he catches the ball to the net and throws it to the ref that's way over there.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, so that, because then he can get back down. The refs then got to get the ball there. Another team gets frustrated. It's hilarious. But that's where I worry about the voting a little bit. If people look at Janai and go, like, he doesn't jump over people.
Right.
He's just like a workman. And Cooper is athletic and he's fluid and he just does a lot of those things. And of course, you got the Duke on your chest and he's going to be number one in the NBA draft pick. There's just some dynamics there that I think Janai's playing against that I hope just the sheer number of quality teams more that Janai had to play. I hope that factors in.
It should. I mean, obviously it depends on the voters. It's subjective to their criteria because I don't believe there's nothing that's clear cut as to how you vote for National Player of the Year.
Yeah.
But I don't know how you could look at those two schedules and not think, okay, somebody played a different level of competition by comparison to the other. And maybe Cooper Flagg would have done everything that he's doing right now, but you don't know that either.
Yeah.
And that's why the games have to matter.
Yes, that's the point. I personally think Cooper would. Go look at what he did against Kentucky and Kansas and Auburn. He balled out. Like it's not like Cooper when he played the really good teams like sucked. That's not the case. I mean, I can't remember. I looked it up a week or so ago, but I mean, his numbers against Kentucky were impressive. His numbers against Kansas were impressive. He had a great game against Auburn.
Right.
He's got a 40-point game this year. Like he's done it. It's just it's the point you make, which is the games have to matter, which is saying that's great, but basically for every one quad one game Cooper Flagg played, Janai played 2.
Yes.
And it just that adds up over a couple months of just imagine a scenario where you're like, all right, both of you guys are going to play a quad one game this week. They boom. All right, Cooper, you get next week off. Janai, you got another one. And then they do that. And then the next week, they both play one again. And then you go, oh, and then the next week, Cooper, you got this one. Nope, Janai, you still got another one. Mm-hmm. Like that's what it would be like. And it's just and you tack on banging down low and what that takes the toll on your body versus Cooper playing more on the perimeter and Janai's down there getting doubled and getting hacked and getting slashed and he's backing people down and he's trying to get boards and like it's just I just think you got to respect all that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Still some ways to go. Glad Auburn's kind of doing the full pursuit, full on website for Janai. He deserves it because you're really close, man. You're really close to Auburn having a National Player of the Year. And who knows? Maybe they could split it. Maybe one gets the Wooden and one gets the Naismith. I don't know. That'd be fun. That'd be funny and dumb. It's like the Heisman and the Maxwell.
Yes.
It's like, what are we doing? Aren't these the same things? Why are we like,
right? Why do we need 2 different awards to do the same thing?
Didn't Peyton and Charles split that?
I believe so. Yeah, I think Peyton Manning was the.
Or am I making that up?
No. I think you're right with Peyton Manning winning the Maxwell. Charles Woodson absolutely won the Heisman.
So we'll see, but love where this Auburn team's at. All right, so you got Kentucky and A&M. Let's talk about that real quick before we go. I mean, look, Bruce is funny. His answer after the Ole Miss game was funny. Politically correct. They said, what do you make of not being able to win? Not you personally, but Auburn not being able to win in Rupp. First of all, Auburn's only won there twice ever. Is what I believe. I haven't specifically looked at it. I'm pretty sure that's the stat though. Only twice ever they've won. In January of '88 was the last time they did, which is, by the way, another thing that's wild is the last time they won there, all they did was just go in there and beat number 1, which is hilarious on its own. It's like you never win there except when you went there and beat them when they were number 1. That's pretty wild. But since then, 20 straight losses in Rupp. There's a lot of blowouts in there. There's some close ones. The Samir team went in there and played them close.
Yes.
But 2 years ago, they got absolutely demolished. That Auburn team that was kind of a so-so team that had, that couldn't really get over the hump. They went in there when they had Sheboy and they got crushed. I don't remember the stats, but I remember after that game, Bruce, like they got out rebounded by like 30
Yeah.
In that game. And then last year, of course, different teams, but last year Auburn had the team. I thought Auburn was better in Kentucky and shot horribly in Neville and lost that game. But anyway, you lose 20 straight in Rupp. And after the game, Bruce was talking about not, the success Auburn hasn't had in Rupp, the lack of success. He's like, well, historically, they've been the best team in the league, and we have not been that. It's like, it's a good way of being like, yeah, well, when Kentucky's the best team in SEC basketball history and we're like basically the worst, how many times do you think we won there? It's like, so yeah, Auburn's record in Rupp is horrendous. I mean, but he said we're trying to put a dent in that. Like I said, they've come close. The Final Four team went in there and got shellacked.
Yes.
And then I think the Sharif team that was somewhat close. Of course, there was no crowd. The Jabari team won. Then they went back with the Auburn team that was sort of so-so, got destroyed. And then Auburn lost last year. So they have a couple. The Samir team was in the game. But man, it's hard to get bigger than this. National TV, ABC. You can break a streak in Rupp and win a share of the SEC championship in one fell swoop, and beat a program like Kentucky that's that's for Auburn. It doesn't matter if Auburn's won because of that history, winning in Rupp. So you got a chance to win for the first time since '88 and share a title at the same time. And for Bruce would mean the world. Like there's big things on the horizon, but for Bruce Pearl, somebody that cares about history and records and just legacy, and he cares about those things, this is one. Like getting off this snide, getting off this, this monkey off the back of the Auburn program of not winning in Rupp. It's like when Auburn football finally won in Baton Rouge. It was just like,
yeah,
it was like that one game, just it meant a lot. This one game, regardless of everything going on, would just mean a lot to go in there and actually. There's people I've never seen Auburn. I was born 4 years before. I was born in '84. I've never seen them go into Rupp and win. How many people have never seen that in their entire life?
You're right. And this is a very different Kentucky team than probably the teams we've seen underneath John Calipari. I mean, Calipari has kind of the dribble drive offense, and they're very rugged defensively with a lot of man-to-man.
Mm-hmm.
This team is very different with a, advanced 5-out spacing type offense, very creative. They shoot the ball extremely well. Defensively, they struggle. They've had some point guard issues the past couple of weeks where they've had injuries at that position. I think they had their top 3 guys out. Now they're starting to get a little more healthy, which obviously adds to the degree of difficulty in this game for Auburn. But let me say this is very much a game Auburn can win. I think Auburn's going to have to score in this one, though, to win. This cannot be a game where they struggle offensively and think that they're going to hold Kentucky in check in that building. It just doesn't work that way for them. But I do believe that Kentucky will give Auburn enough opportunities, and they're just – I don't know what the issue is. When I look at them athletically, they're not bad. But maybe it's just a team defensive thing, and they just have some breakdowns. I'm not exactly sure what happens there that gives way to them giving up large point totals at different times. I mean, you saw it against Alabama, and this was on the road last week, where they jumped out to a fantastic start. I think had a 10-point lead at one point, and then just the dam broke, and they never could. I think they expended a lot of energy to try to keep it tight, and then all of a sudden it just, the camel's back broke, and they couldn't get back over. And the same thing happened to them in multiple other games this year. I mean, I've kind of watched Kentucky on and off, kind of kept an eye on them, and in one game or another, they just figure out a way not to necessarily show up defensively like you think they should, given some of the athleticism that they have on that team. And again, I don't know the exact reason. I do know that they have a very talented offensive team, and they've got a very good offensive coach that I have a lot of admiration for, a guy that I think is going to be a rising star within the business. But again, this is a game that Auburn can win if they show up in sync and cohesive on the offensive end and are making their shots. But you need a game like you had where you went to Oxford about a month ago and you see it go in. I don't think you have to shoot it at that exact clip, but you need to be north of 35% from three in this game. You need to be efficient offensively, making those twos and around the basket. And obviously, at the charity stripe, they need to kind of continue to parlay on what they started the other night to make sure that you come out of Rupp with a victory. And as you said, one game closer to a championship. This clinches. This is big. For that reason alone, clinching a championship is always a big deal. But to do it in Kentucky's house, with the program that Kentucky has been and the program that Auburn wants to become, which is a blue blood, right? To do that, you have to win championships, multiple conference championships. Auburn's on verge of doing that. This would be a huge feather in Bruce's cap.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see. I mean, Lamont Butler and Jackson Robinson, I think it is. Those are the two guys that I guess were are probably going to play. Have been out. Lamont Butler's their point guard. He makes it go. And then Jackson Robinson is a sharpshooter. But you're right. I mean, look, Kentucky's close to losing 3 of their last 4. I mean, Oklahoma, they needed a game winner to win, lost at Alabama, beat Vanderbilt, lost at Texas. Like, that's their last 4. But, yeah, you look at them at home. Look, we know what kind of defense Florida has. They scored 106 on them when they were healthy.
Yeah.
A&M in Rupp, they scored 81 on A&M. Alabama lost, but they scored 97 at home. Arkansas, they lost. They scored 79. South Carolina, they won. They scored 80. Tennessee, we know what kind of defense they have. They scored 75 at home against them. Vanderbilt, they scored 82. So like they're gonna hit 80. I mean, they're gonna get to that. Alabama game is a deal that that was a track meet. But if they're healthy, they're gonna get to 80. It feels like it could be. I don't know. It's sort of like trying to go to Alabama. I mean, you're gonna need a pretty efficient day. I mean, if you hold them to 80, 85, you probably didn't play horribly. It's a tall when you play a team that's as good offensively as Kentucky or Bama in their place. It's like, man, it puts a lot of pressure on you to try to get to 85 plus. So yeah, I think if Auburn goes in there and shoots well, they're gonna be right there. And I don't know. I mean, I'm sort of I totally agree with you. You got to go score, but it also feels like you've got the better defense. That has to show up.
Agreed.
If your defense shows up, then you've got the efficiency, and I think you got the pieces to make it work. Don't get caught up in a track meet with these guys. It's kind of like BP. It's kind of like the Alabama game. Don't use your moments. If there's a moment to go down and play transition, fine. But we are not running. It was not a track meet with them, just like it was Bama. I think the approach needs to be similar. Get off to a good start, get going. But look, Kentucky's is good when they're healthy. I mean, they beat Duke. Hello.
Yes.
When they're healthy, they're good. When A&M is healthy, they're really good. I don't know what's going on. The last couple of losses for them are weird. I thought A&M was a team to watch out for, and they're sputtering, but they are still plenty good enough to beat Auburn in College Station. I don't know which game I think Auburn's got a better chance of winning, to be honest with you. I mean, A&M's weird because you're going to be coming back from Rupp on Saturday, Sunday, Monday afternoon. You're traveling again for a Tuesday game in College Station. That's going to be a physical battle. Kentucky might be a little more up and down. Certainly Rupp Arena, that atmosphere is going to be, more wild than College Station. Not saying that won't be a tough atmosphere, but this Rupp's going to be, number one's coming in there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know which one I sort of think is an easier get. They're both tough. I mean, I don't know that I could pinpoint like which one I think Auburn's got a better chance of winning, honestly.
I'm with you. I think 2 weeks ago I would have very clearly said A&M. And today, given some of the losses, and you just talked about it, Vanderbilt, Miss State, good ball clubs. I mean, I think tournament teams, if Vanderbilt continues to play the
Yeah.
way that they are,
Yeah.
both tournament teams, but not somebody you would have thought would have beat Texas A&M in their place.
Yeah.
And again, depth of this conference. I mean, they were challenged before the season. Every team in this league went out and won non-conference games that are showing up now.
Mm-hmm.
And you're seeing this play out in SEC play and teams being talked about getting in the tournament that are not even 500. And when can you and I think about a time in the SEC where teams were talked about getting in the tournament and not just like squeaking into like a play-in game, like 11 seed? Like these guys are like solid eights. You know what I mean? Like you're in. And again, it's the depth of the conference. So maybe that's just a byproduct of A&M being worn down at certain times, teams catching them at the right moment. I don't really know, but I'm with you. I don't think it's as clear cut as to who I think Auburn has a better shot at winning the game against. Not nearly as much as I would have thought a couple weeks ago. And maybe that's a credit to Kentucky, or maybe that's just some of the recency bias with A&M. I'm not exactly sure what's affecting my judgment there, but maybe a combination thereof.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sitting here looking at it. I mean, something's up with A&M. I mean, you lose on the road to Mississippi State, fine, but that was a 16-point loss. Then you come home, you lose to Tennessee. Tennessee's a really good team and can match up with you. Tennessee played well offensively. Then you come home, you lose to Vanderbilt at home. So you lost 3 in a row.
Right.
And then the other thing to think about is, so Auburn has this game in Rupp, right? That will be electric atmosphere. A lot of energy will be expended in this one.
Yes.
Who does A&M have on Saturday? They're in Gainesville. So, so maybe in that regard, while Auburn certainly will have a tough game as well, Florida plays better defense than Kentucky. I mean, A&M's lost 3 in a row, and they got to go to Gainesville and try to figure things out. And now if they do, boy, they're going to be coming back home with a lot of confidence. Yeah. But I would maybe like potentially where if A&M loses that's 4-game losing streak, and they're coming in versus what you're getting at. So I would think that maybe that's the easier game of these two. I just really want them to get one. I mean, I'd love for them to win both, but I'd love for them to get one. I don't have any predictions. Let's see. The analytics have got Auburn about a 5-point favorite over A&M, and I think it's about that for Kentucky.
That would seem right to me.
It is 5. So the analytics have got them about 5 points, 87-82 Kentucky and 76-71 in College Station. So, I mean, monster games. I mean, you get one of the next 2, and it's a share. It's at least a share. Or you could just go win them all.
You could.
What a close that would be. My God, I mean, they've already done enough to be the most impressive regular season I've ever seen. What if they just close going, we'll just go to Rupp and we'll go to College Station, and then we'll just have the Bama game. We'll talk about that next week, but that's got all the makings of being an absolute grind. Alabama and Auburn have got such hard schedules that by the time that game comes around, I feel like those two teams are going to be like, oh my gosh, they're going to be exhausted.
I don't disagree. And I just talked about how Auburn might be on the toughest 3-game stretch. Alabama's 3-game stretch during that time period is Tennessee, Florida, Auburn.
That's crazy how that turned out. That's crazy.
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe SEC scheduling said, maybe they knew, hey, we think Auburn, Alabama might be pretty good. Let's make it a sort of, it's almost a round robin. Like Florida plays almost the same teams Auburn did in the last 4 -1. Like they share 3 of them. But that loss from Florida to Georgia kind of puts them out of it. It's pretty much Auburn, Alabama. I don't think there's any way around that. I mean, I guess Florida could beat Bama, but Auburn could somehow lose out. I don't know. Maybe there's a way, but it'd be
tough.
Yeah, it'd be tough. All right. Well, it's gonna be a challenging week for Auburn. They've been at home for 3 games in a row. They haven't had to travel anywhere, so we'll see what they look like. Kentucky, just remember, like it's just It's just one game. The Final Four team went in there and got demolished, and they went to the Final Four. But would like to see them get the monkey off their back and Rupp. That would just be, regardless of anything else that happens, that's one of those games. It's like a stand. That's like beating Alabama and Tuscaloosa. It's like one of those that no matter what else happens, and you could be disappointed if they don't make the Final Four or whatever, but you'll go, man. But that one, that was a special one that stands on its own. The one in Rupp would be that no matter what else happens, you'd go, but you broke the streak and you won in Rupp, and that streak's over, and that would be meaningful no matter what else happens. You know what I mean?
I could not agree with you more. Be the first team since Chris Morris's Auburn-led program. Chris Morris, that's what we're talking about here. It's the last time Auburn won in Rupp. So, yes, this game absolutely stands alone, regardless of who's in a Kentucky uniform.
It'll be a fun one. Enjoy it. I think the coaches are going to be mic'd up. So it'll be a really cool broadcast. And just, good to see Auburn go in there and compete in Rupp. And we'll see how they do. All right, we'll be back next Thursday. We'll talk about Kentucky and A&M, and then of course we will preview Alabama, and then we may come back the next week and maybe we'll pop in before the SEC tournament probably. So we'll have a next week show where we preview the two and just look ahead to Alabama and kind of seeding and all that good stuff. So all right, everybody have fun. Go to auburnlive.com, subscribe. I think it's $1 right now. It gets you like a first free week or whatever it is. Go take advantage of that. Subscribe and turn on notifications on the Auburn Live YouTube channel as well. For Alan, I'm Justin Hokanson. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.